Hello and welcome to Leviathan News. It's October 10th, and you saw our shiny new intro that Garrett had been working on for the past few days. Our master of ControlNet and Stable Diffusion is making some amazing stuff. And as well, thank you from the Pika Labs, guys. But today we have two special guests. We have Anton from Pendle, and then we also have Corey Kaplan from Dolomite. And they are here to come and talk about the Arbitrum STIP voting that has been taking place. And welcome to both of you.
Yep. Hey, everyone. Happy to be here.
So, Corey, we've had you on before.
Yeah, that's right.
And Anton, this is your first time. So for the people who haven't heard you on Leviathan News before, Anton, maybe you can give a little intro about what you're doing at Pendle.
Sure. Hey, everyone. So my name is Anton, and I lead the ecosystem growth side of Pendle. So still part of the business development team at Pendle. And what I basically do is, well, just that, right? Try to grow our ecosystem in general. So when it comes to partnerships with protocols or anything to do with activities on chain, then I'm the guy that mainly interfaces with other external communities in that sense. So when it comes to, for example, grants, then I would be the guy that's mainly handling all that. So yeah, in particular with this Arbitrum short-term incentives program, then I was the one who drafted the proposal and put it up for everyone to vote on.
Very cool. And then Corey, we've had you on before. I was listening to our episode this morning, actually. And so Corey is the CEO and co-founder of Dolomite. And he is here today to also talk about his looks to be successful proposal that's happening on Arbitrum.
Yeah, that's right. So, I already mentioned Corey from Dolomite. We're building a next generation lending protocol on Arbitrum, really looking to support some Arbitrum native assets and introduce some much needed innovation in the lending space. And our proposal is no different in that regard. We wanted to bring a fresh perspective onto grants and proposals like this. So excited to talk more about that later.
So maybe we can get in the weeds a little bit. We'll start with Anton in alphabetical order. Maybe you can talk about like what you're trying to achieve with the STIP grant and how the process went, the feedback, everything, and what you're looking forward in this implementation process that's coming over the next few months.
Sure. So just to set some context, right, Pendle has been live in Arbitrum since 1st of March of this year. So roughly about 6 or 7 months, I believe. And we weren't a beneficiary of the initial airdrop that was given out to most of the protocols that were deployed on Arbitrum. So this would be our first foray into submitting a proposal to be able to get some AARB to use that as incentives for our community, right? And the background of what we're trying to do with this this grant is that we first want to deepen liquidity for the different pools on Pendle, and we'd want to encourage more yield trades. So in terms of increasing that volume and active usage on the app itself on Pendle by incentivizing those actions, right? And I think that would be our main goal. And I think we're also just trying to evangelize this idea of yield trading because it's a fairly new concept, right? It's also quite complicated, and we've tried very hard to explain it to a lot of users. In fact, we've been live since, like for the protocol itself, we've been live since 2021, but we've only gotten significant traction the past or this year, right? With we were a big beneficiary of the rise of liquid staking tokens like STETH, RETH, etc. Mainly because it led up to the Sheppel upgrade, and I think people saw Pendle as an avenue to be able to hedge or trade that yield, and also to do more with their liquid staking tokens, right? So beyond that, on Arbitrum, we have gotten synergy with, per protocols like GMX, Gains, and also the different liquid staking tokens that are there. So because Arbitrum is basically, cheaper in terms of gas, then it encouraged people more to experiment and, be able to trade that yield on Arbitrum itself. So I would say that Arbitrum is actually the network that we have the highest trading volume out of all the networks that we're deployed in. And yeah, like, I think we would want to definitely grow more beyond that. So that was kind of like the main motivation for this grant and why we applied for it. And like, cross fingers that we do get it, although it does look good for us. But yeah, like, overall, I think once the grant has been given out to everyone in the for the different protocols, then we can expect Arbitrum season to begin. And hopefully, for those who haven't tried Pendle yet, maybe you would be encouraged to try it out now, because there's going to be a lot of incentives to go around, right, for especially those who are very new to yield trading. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually serendipitous that we have Corey here today from Dolomite, because Dolomite provides a really core function for the PT tokens that you guys issue, which is to provide a lending market for it and to be able to short the yield. And I think that Dolomite is the only place that you can borrow and lend against PT tokens at the moment. Is that right, Corey?
I think there's a few venues that offer like limited functionality for some PT tokens. I can confidently say that we were the first ones to list a YT token for borrowing against, which that came with a lot of exotic flavor to it. But I think in terms of like product market fit and just market share, I think we have a pretty dominating force for the PT assets so far, and that's also with limited support. We only listed PT GLP so far, and we have intention to list more than just PT GLP in the future. So, but yeah, similar to what Anton had already mentioned, there's a lot of similarities between what happened with Pendle initially at Arbitrum and actually Dolomite as well. We've been live since October of last year, so we're coming up on 1 year pretty soon. But similar to them, this is actually our first foray really into getting Arbitrum incentives. When the DAO airdrop happened, Dolomite did not get anything specifically for its previous participation and having deployed on top of Arbitrum because we didn't have a DAO in place yet. So this is a really exciting time for us, as long as hopefully, of course, we are able to, we just passed quorum this morning, but we hopefully also will still receive a grant depending on like what happens with the budgetary constraints. But so with that, we're really excited because this is actually our first time getting incentives and actually using them ever to grow Dolomite. Up until this point, Dolomite doesn't actually have a native token out. So everything that we've gotten so far has just been from trying to drive as much utility and usefulness through the ecosystem and getting partners and people running strategies and things like that on the platform to start using it. And so far, we actually hit several growth limitations because of lack of supply side liquidity for users that want to go borrow and run PT-based strategies, for example. So, pretty recently when yield started to drop a bit after like that correction we saw in mid-August, GLP started to come down, and then we started to see more consistent usage in PT GLP because its yield was fixed and more people could run strategies that were less price sensitive to what was going on in the market and therefore less yield sensitive as well. And when this was all happening over the past couple of months, pretty frequently our interest rates would shoot up higher than like that of AAVEs or other lending protocols because people were paying a premium to borrow assets that they couldn't run strategies for elsewhere. So for us, one of the core postures we took with the proposal was to try to find ways that we can drive much more lendable assets into Dolomite. So we aren't going to be playing the same cat and mouse game of trying to grow, hand in hand with the assets as more demand comes through, and then more people want to try to arbitrage the yield back down and play back and forth with that game of growing iteratively back and forth.
Yeah, and I do notice that on your proposals, both of you, unlike a lot of the other protocols that applied for these STIP grants, neither of you actually had to revise your original ask downwards. So I guess that brings up the question is, like, should you have asked for more? Like, was this too conservative in the amounts that you were asking for, or is it just that right amount, right? Because when it comes to these Arbitrum grants, like, should you be, asking for double what you did? Pendle asked for 2 million and Dolomite asked for 1 million ARB. Could you have asked for 4 million and 2 million and gotten revised down to 3 and 1.5? Like, what was the sense there in coming up with these numbers?
Yeah, so I can start there, I guess. You want to go ahead, Corey?
Sure. I'll just start just because I think that we're in a different position than Pendle, just in terms of like market size and also market fit. Pendle is a much larger protocol than Dolomite is and has a more dominating force, not just on Arbitrum, but on Ethereum as well. So I think that Pendle might have been in a better spot to potentially ask for more, but they were a bit constrained by the overall size of the budget for these STIP grants, being at 50 million tokens. All of a sudden going from 1 to 2, you're going from, a 2% ask to a 4% ask of the total budget potentially.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking to us in particular, they did set up a templating system for how long you've been live for, what TVL you have, and other metrics. And ours should have been roughly 750k tokens, and we actually did push things a bit further by asking for 1 million, strictly because we thought we brought a pretty innovative proposal, and there were some intangibles roped in with that template that just didn't quite fit the mold of what value we thought we were bringing to the ecosystem, as well as the stuff we have planned. And where we think that our future growth will be shortly after some new things we're about to release. So, there was a lot of consideration there with that. So, I will say that we did push things a bit, in my opinion, but I'm pleasantly surprised that we didn't get pushed back down to where we quote unquote could have been or should have been.
Yeah, so to echo what Corey said, there's basically this guideline that the Arbitrum Incentives Working Group kind of like written up. So we basically applied for the maximum that was allowed for the criteria that we are eligible for. So for example, how long you've been live in Arbitrum, how much TVL you've garnered, how much volume, etc. So based on those metrics, we've been able to apply for what they call the lighthouse grants, right, which is a maximum of 2 million ARB. And for those who have been longer or live longer in Arbitrum and gotten more volume and TVL, then you could have asked for a higher cap, like 5 million plus. So that would definitely apply for the likes of Camelot, GMX, and all those very early Arbitrum native protocols out there. But hopefully, if there is going to be another STIP kind of like program happening in the future, then we would probably, if hopefully that we get more traction, then we'd be able to apply for higher grants in the future.
And just to echo that once again, I think that one of our key takeaways as well with the approach was, this STIP grant was more of the starting point than the finish line. So our goal, similar to Pendle, is to prove traction, show that the incentive mechanism that we're going to use hopefully will work quite well. So if we come back, we're more of a results-driven team where we can point to these things and say, hey, this went really well, we grew, and also we were able to align the Arbitrum tokens that we were distributing with the actual Arbitrum holders to minimize price impact. So there's some things that we could hopefully point to with it that I think will be very results driven.
So we had on Windmoon last week, and he was talking about the distribution of these short-term incentives, and he said the overall goal with these ARB tokens was to distribute them as fast as possible in just the shortest amount of time, which is about 3 months. And you get these tokens and you have to spend them, and it's not like you can sit on them for 6 months next year and kind of pocket them and wait for the right time. So when looking at this very short-term quarter-long incentive drive that's going to be taking place, how do you think it's going to bring in sticky users and liquidity? How do you design systems for that? So the capital that you're getting, obviously some of it's going to be mercenary, but at the end of the day, what's the goal or operations that you're building into your protocol distribution mechanisms to help keep users on Arbitrum and in your protocols?
Yeah, I guess I can start here. So I think Arbitrum has been known to have this very grassroots DeFi community, right? So you would say, or we could say that a lot of this well-known DeFi protocols are based in Arbitrum, and I think with this incentives, especially that it to be used in the next 3 or 4 months, right? Until I think at the end of January 2024. I think definitely there's going to be a lot of mercenaries that would be there just to farm the ARB, right? But I think beyond that, we would definitely just want to encourage usage across this different protocols, just to try them out. Like for us at Pendle, I would say that we are unique in the way where I think we're the only protocol on Arbitrum that offers the trading of yield. And so if if a user that hasn't used us is encouraged enough to just partake because they want to get use that or get that incentive, then it's a win for us because once they realize that, hey, there's this powerful tool that they can use that could be part of their whole DeFi process to make strategies or make a profit, then that would be a big win for us, and maybe they would stick around as well, to use further Pendle for whatever strategies that they're thinking of with with their own funds. And I think that's kind of like how we're trying to look into this in a very synergistic way with other protocols. That's why we like working closely with the likes of Dolomite and other protocols such as GMX, Camelot, etc. So it's very synergistic where we could, let's say, take a GLP that comes from GMX, right? Create a pool out of it on Pendle so that people can yield trade it, and then beyond that, you can take the fixed rate asset, which is the principal token, and then use that as collateral in Dolomite to borrow against it, and then you can do more strategies around that. So overall, for a user that is DeFi savvy, then he would see the benefit of being able to try all this different protocols on Arbitrum, and on top of that, being able to gain in more rewards in the form of those ARB incentives.
Yeah, and we also had on Sammy yesterday, who had come to talk about Pyrex and Dinero that Redacted was putting out soon, and I was pleasantly surprised to hear that Pendle had been working with him on the deployment of the PTYT tokens for their upcoming LSD.
Yeah. So we actually just got off a call with them, with the Redacted team. So they are launching PXETH soon, and yeah, I think that's something to look forward to on Pendle quite soon when they launch.
On the Ethereum side, though, so
yeah, on the Ethereum side, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's really cool. I mean, like, so what was the feedback and like delegation process like? Did you have to like lobby for votes, or did you think that political will? I mean, both of your projects have been on Arbitrum for a long time. I think Dolomite was one of the first projects to emerge on Arbitrum, and so the political capital seems to be there, seeing how fast your votes passed, and also Pendle as an up and coming protocol, catching this wave that we've seen over this past summer. Like, was it difficult to find the votes, or was it more that the political will was already there and it was mostly just about bolstering support and getting the votes in?
Yeah, I would say that we definitely relied a lot on our branding. So hopefully most of these delegates have heard of Pendle in some way, especially since we're quite young in the Arbitrum scene, right? So I think that with the proposal itself, if people kind of like talk about yield trading and realize that, oh, Pendle's the only one that actually does that on Arbitrum, then we would get more recognition and eyeballs on our proposal from the different delegates, right? So I think we did have to reach out to different delegates just to make them aware that such like that our proposal exists, right? Especially if they haven't heard of us. So yeah, I think it's more of like just reaching out and making them aware that we do have a proposal up, and just trying to get the word out through Twitter as well and through other partner protocols that we work with. So we did ask help from just trying to let them get the word out, right? Like maybe asking through friends from Redacted or JMX, Camelot, etc. Those who are hyper connected within the Arbitrum space. So yeah.
Yeah, similar for us. Like, we have some pretty close connections to others in the Arbitrum ecosystem. In general, I think it felt like the war was really already done before the. But similar to what Anton was saying, like, the process was reaching out to delegates, making sure that they were aware that we had posted one. There were several data projects that have been around for a while but didn't post a proposal. So it was pretty common for them not to post. So it was more of an awareness drive than it was, pure lobbying. So far, I don't actually had to have a conversation where I needed to convince them of what it was that we were doing, as compared to just saying like, hey, this thing's up. Do you have any questions about it? The answer is usually no, and we want to go vote for you guys. This is really cool. So it felt really gratifying in that way, that a lot of the goodwill that we had established over several months in the making was being appreciated by people. And certainly can't take all the credit for it. Our team has been incredible with reaching out to different teams and establishing a really friendly demeanor with all the other core Arbitrum teams that wanted to work with us, so they did a really good job. If you want to call that lobbying, then sure. But overall, very pleased with the process in that regard.
Could we talk a bit more about the process? Because last week we had an Arbitrum panel where a lot of the people who at this point, like the process was still new, we're talking about like the pros and cons of how this whole thing played out. And while I'm sure it would be easy to say like, yes, it went great, we got our grants, it was a perfect process. Like, what is your honest feedback on this kind of process that was put in place by Arbitrum to dole out these grants?
Yeah, so I would say that, the entire thing is still an experiment. So the delegates, the DAO itself are trying to figure out what's a good process to make sure that, things work well, right? So this would be the first, and we would expect future grant proposals or grants to happen. Yeah, but overall, I would say that the process isn't set in stone yet. So depending on the feedback from the different protocols that got a grant and those who didn't get a grant, there'll be a lot of discussions to figure out what's the best way forward. So I would say that this kind of mirrors the way how Optimism does it. So Optimism has several cycles now of their grants, process, right? And each cycle they have modified it in a way that works or based on the feedback of the current cycle, right? So in the same way with Arbitrum, based on the feedback of the different protocols and the DAO, the delegates or the users, we would definitely see maybe a different methodology or process in the next grant cycle as well. But yeah, overall, I would say that this is still an experiment, and the intention is there, right? The intention is to make Arbitrum a great ecosystem, and make the entire process seamless and less painful for the next proposals that will come up.
Right. So let's talk about the distribution of this ARB that's actually coming up. So we'll start with Pendle first. Taking a look at your execution strategy, there are 3 different strategies where the ARB is going to be distributed to. So the first is your Pendle pools, and these are liquidity pools where people can deposit assets and get back a mixture of either PT or YT tokens. You'll have 1.1 million ARB, which is 55% of the grant size, will be allocated to these pools. Is that going to be equally across all the pools that are on Arbitrum right now?
So it will depend on the Pendle voting weight per pool, respective of the overall total weight on Arbitrum, right? So we have an epoch that lasts every week, so starts and ends every Thursday midnight. And depending on that voting result, then the amount of ARB incentives allocated to that pool will change every week. So yeah, I think this overall incentivizes people to vote for the Arbitrum pools, because all our voting is basically done on Ethereum, and then we just use a messaging protocol like Layer 0 to be able to broadcast that voting result across the different chains, right? And so I think with this Arbitrum incentives, this would encourage all the different our Pendle users, right, to mostly vote for those Arbitrum pools, and thereby depending on that voting weight on on Arbitrum, they would get the allocated amount of ARB incentives.
Yeah, so just bringing up those pools right now, we have a let me make this bigger just for everybody. So the top pool by TVL right now is the GLP pool, then Rocket Pool and Lido, the Gains Die pool, and then Rapsteth again. So what's the difference between these 2 Rapsteth pools, or 3 Rapsteth pools?
Yeah, so the main difference is the maturity date. So you can see there on the middle column. For the in the middle column, you have one that's ending on December 2023, one that's on 2025, 2024. So the main goal here is we're trying to build a DeFi native yield curve where users can have exposure to different maturity dates based on their risk profile. So for example, they can get a fixed rate for a short-term or short-dated pool, and then be able to collect the yield on that. But if they are bullish ETH on the long run, then they can choose a long-dated pool instead. And how the yield is being traded for each maturity date differs as well, right? So for example, for short-dated pools, the yield being traded would be probably more volatile because of that short-term that they can trade it.
Yeah, and I guess the interesting thing about the Arbitrum markets is that GLP is here at the top, right? And it's probably going to increase in size as well too once the GMX grants get added as well too. Interesting. Did you see that Lido had been having some trouble getting enough votes to get over the line? They hadn't reached quorum yet, as I've checked this morning.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Seen it as well.
Yeah. Like, are you guys worried about that when it comes to like growth on your ecosystem? I know that Rapsteth is the largest pool on the Ethereum side, and it's, you know, cumulatively between all the maturity dates here, it's bigger than the GLP pool here. So do you think it's going to have any effect if they don't pass on TVL coming over from Steph?
Yeah, I mean, Lido is a very well-known brand all across of the crypto world, right? And I think that the main disagreement from the delegates with the Lido proposal is just how their grant is being used, and we could basically see that through the votes, right? So, and there's going to be a second round of this like STIP as well. So there could be a chance that Lido changes the way that their execution goes, or with the usage of their grant, and maybe in the next one they would be able to get all those votes. But overall, it doesn't really directly affect us because I think for the Lido grant, right, if I'm not wrong, the usage of the ARB is mainly for incentivizing liquidity for the different pools on different dexes, like on Camelot, on Kyber, etc. So for us, it really doesn't directly affect us per se. Yeah.
Okay. Then moving on to the second strategy, which is the campaigns. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So if you notice there on the header on the right side, there's a campaign tab. So if you click that, yeah, that one. Yeah. So you can think of this as kind of like our task-based quests that's very similar to, those out there like a Rabbit Hole or Galaxy, for example. But this is very specific to Pendle. So this quest was mainly, it was made because we wanted to have a gamified way for users to interact with Pendle, right? So whether they, we'd want them to get their first yield token or be able to hold a principal token of a certain duration, or be able to LP into several pools. So these quests are meant to like have users be familiar with the whole Pendle interface, or the Pendle mechanism, so to say, right? And so with the ARP grant, we'll definitely compose more campaigns that will use this as incentives. So we'll probably have campaigns that is dedicated to yield trading itself. So if you click the dashboard, like if you go back to the app, there is a leaderboard, and with that leaderboard, maybe you can show that. Yeah. So if you click, go back to the app, then there's a leaderboard tab. Yeah, this one. Yeah, this one over here. So this one is in beta right now, and we just recently released this in the last 2 to 3 weeks. But the goal here is that every season there would be campaigns, or like a trading campaign, where based on the the P&L of the user or the amount that he has traded, then he would be receiving some incentives in the form of like Pendle tokens, or maybe including this ARB incentive as well. So yeah, like throughout the ARB program, we'll be using these to incentivize different campaigns, which include trading campaigns. We will soon have a limit order feature out as well, like sometime November or December. So that will be, we will have some incentives used as well to encourage market makers to put up limit orders. And yeah, like going back to the campaign as well, if you do the different quests, then you'll be able to get those incentives.
Cool. So is it going to be the OG Pirates one, or will you have a new campaign for the...
Yeah, there's going to be like new ones. So these ones are already like ongoing, and some of them have already ended. And if you did complete the quest, then you would get the Peepo, right? The Peepo NFT that we have there. So by right, if you have that Peepo NFT, it should change the image on your left. That Peepo there, that is kind of like the Clippy or the help one. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah. So you can have like a pirate or a doctor, or like different Peepos. So very thematic to your overall experience of the UX, right? Yeah. So this is something that you've probably unlocked. But we have pirates and stuff, and we'll have more Peepos in the future. And coming with the ARB incentives, right? So we might have something that's very Arbitrum specific and very time limited, right? So very rare. And these are NFTs, so these could be traded on OpenSea as well. But yeah, something that we're thinking about, and maybe we'll have more details, especially once we start deploying that grant.
Very nice. And then the last part of the grant strategy is for integrations. So you have 100,000 ARB, which is 5% of the total size, which would be allocated to explore ecosystem integrations.
Yep. So basically, there are many protocols that have integrated Pendle in some way on Arbitrum. So, one example is Dolomite. And we would definitely want to encourage users to make more use of their Pendle assets by exploring these different integrations, right? So if you use Pendle and then you have, let's say, PTs or YTs, and then you make more use of that on Dolomite, then you are entitled to get more of that, reward, right? So yeah, like we'll publish all these details later on, but yeah, like we would want you to explore the kind of like the greater DeFi that is available in Arbitrum, which includes the different protocols that have integrated Pendle in some way.
Yeah. Well, cool. So let's hop over to Corey. Corey, I was looking at your proposal as well too, and I did have some questions about it. Right. So as you're running a money market, so you're setting it up so it's a liquidity mining program where people can stake USDC, ETH, wrap Bitcoin, ARB, link, and you get oARB admissions. This oARB is continuously minted, and then there's something about like a lockup here. So maybe you could talk about like what's happening with the grant distribution mechanism.
Yeah, absolutely. So in general, what we wanted to do was find a way to, as already mentioned, boost liquidity of lendable assets for Dolomite, and very much so be able to remain aligned with the Arbitrum DAO that's very graciously going to be giving us these tokens for growing. So we've seen old school liquidity mining program from that of like Sushi, where they basically just spat out Sushi tokens as long as you stake the LPs, and sure enough, it didn't really end so well for them because farmers were basically getting these tokens for free at zero cost basis, and their only incentive was to basically dump them to realize some yield from it, so they could basically fight against the impermanent loss or other risks that they were taking on. So what we really wanted to think about was how to distribute these tokens in such a way that can keep these mercenary farmers as maximally aligned as possible. So similar to what Pendle actually has with their campaigns, Dolomite has a campaign system, and we accumulate all these tasks that you've done in the form of points, or we call them XP. And once you accrue enough XP to be level 3, you're eligible to take the oARB that you've earned and actually start using it for vesting. So up until the point of the oARB is valueless because you exercise it, but it's basically just an added step that's going to take the tokens that we're giving you. Let's make sure that you're aligned with us and the greater Arbitrum community as well. And the nice thing with the campaign system being mixed in with it is, in order to reach that level that we're going to encourage users to have to hit, they need to try out Dolomite and some of its more unique features. So it's not just going to be some lazy strategy of depositing liquidity on the Dolomite and then you get free tokens and you can go walk away from it. We really want to make sure that users are at least aware of some of the unique things that we offer, as well as our intention to become increasingly different over time. So where it gets really interesting, and this is where Wen Moon from the Umami team was also really interested in it, was how the vesting mechanism worked, because it really does a good job, in my opinion, of aligning these different actors with that have different interests. So I'm happy to dive into that unless you have some more questions you wanted to talk about preemptively.
Well, I just wanted to ask about the vesting system, right? So from what I understand of the grant proposal, the oARB gets vested, and then after depending on how long you lock it up for, you start to get a larger and larger discount, up to a maximum of 20%. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Right. So at the end of 4 weeks, you're able to purchase the ARB at a discount.
Yeah. So the mechanism is designed around basically doing the cost basis for these farmers, so that they can't just look at it like it's free capital, and therefore it's the first thing they dump when they need to realize an APR or cash up to stables, whatever. And the second mechanism is serving as some kind of financial bottleneck for these individuals, so that whales can't suck up all the capital from the system. So the mechanism for vesting actually is, you already mentioned, of course, you pick the duration, and it's in increments of 1 week up until 4 weeks. And as already mentioned, the longer you decide to vest, the steeper the discount. And the second mechanism is you need to pair Arbitrum tokens with the oARB. And that serves as that financial bottleneck that I mentioned, because of two things. The first is that in order to get the Arbitrum tokens, you have to pair it, which means you need to have some in the first place. And And the second thing is it establishes like some kind of offset for the Arbitrum tokens you're purchasing, so that if you want to sell them, you can, but it's potentially offset by others that are also pairing with their own oARB tokens. So instead of talking about it in theory, or just dive into it more in practice, the main mechanism is if you have 100 oARB tokens and you want to turn them into real ARB, you have to pair it with 100 real ARB tokens. You choose your duration, let's say 4 weeks, and then after the 4-week duration's over, you can take some ETH and pay for the oARB tokens to be formally converted into ARB. So you walk away with 200 then, having started with 100 of each of those different assets. And to give you a more example of the bottlenecking that I mentioned, if you have a whale that potentially farmed all of the oARB tokens, in order to do that vesting, they have to pair it with Arbitrum tokens, as I mentioned. So they're going to be bottlenecked in that they have to either already own the tokens or find some way to get them in order to suck up that capital from smaller users that might be doing it more in like an honest way.
Well, I think there's two knock-on effects here, and the first one being is that people will probably borrow ARB from Dolomite in order to pair with the oARB, right? They could just post up ETH and BTC and then borrow the ARB out, which is good for you guys at the protocol level. And then secondly, I guess my following question would be is like, what happens to all the oARB that isn't paired and claimed at the end of the period?
So two things. First, like that's a really good observation from your end. I think that the oARB mechanism that we created will hopefully spark some more economic activity in the Arbitrum ecosystem, whether it's borrowing ARB from Dolomite, or maybe you want to hedge your position because you do purchase some ARB because now you have a good reason to. Maybe you want to hedge some of that, and you can go do that on GMX. There's plenty of reasons and catalysts to bring new economic activity, depending on what your financial outlook is, to DeFi protocols. So that's really exciting as a second order knock-on effect. And to answer your second question then about what happens at the period end, so technically the ARB that we're receiving from the grant will remain eligible for people to vest it up until the point where it's all been claimed. So we're going to keep emitting oARB tokens until people finally claim whatever is left from Arbitrum, from those Arbitrum tokens. And then after that, the oARB basically expires worthless. It's really a first come first serve game. It has to play hand in hand with the feature I just before.
Yeah, that 3-month period is short.
So I'm curious, like now that you've gotten these big ARB grants, are you going to be heading to as many other side chains as you can and trying to hoover up grants from them, or are you all staying focused on Arbitrum?
Arbitrum will definitely be the main focus for the next 3 to 4 months. Oh yeah, sorry, but yeah, for us, we'll be definitely focusing on it because we have to think about different campaigns and ways to be able to make use of that grant, right? Based on the stipulations that we put in our proposal. But yeah, I would say that it's going to be Arbitrum season, so we would definitely want to put a lot of focus there and market around it, and gain more traction overall on Arbitrum. So yeah, in the next 3 to 4 months, that's what we're going to be busy with, I'm sure.
Yeah, just speaking to Dolomite as well, we've been very focused on being on Arbitrum ever since we launched back in October, and that'll remain so for the future. But we aren't, we are also looking at other networks to potentially deploy to. The timing for that, I don't necessarily know the exact timing, but it's going to happen at some point. But the key thing though is we really want to deploy in just a few networks that we think will have some degree of organic and unique DeFi activity. So we think for Dolomite, our specialty is really connecting the DeFi ecosystem in ways that it couldn't before, and then eventually becoming sort of like a DeFi hub for we're on. If we do, they'll hopefully be ones that bring some degree of Arbitrum so that they're not necessarily directly competing neck and neck, except by virtue of just having their own DeFi ecosystem.
Very cool. So I think there's a lot of interesting strategies that are going to play out as people come into the short-term incentive program. I do like the oARB distribution mechanism, how it's just not like farm and dump, place assets in and forget about it, run some scripts to just claim and get rid of everything. And that's pretty cool. So I think, let's see if we had any questions from the community. Yeah, if you are watching, people at home, please drop anything in if you have any questions for Pendle or Dolomite. And yeah, I overall I've been pretty like happy, and I think the feedback has been pretty good with how the short-term incentive program has gone. Obviously, we haven't gotten to like the practical part of the distribution side yet, but we're going to get there pretty soon, and hopefully we'll get some good analytics and metrics to back up some of the ideas put forward in these proposals.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that, if this becomes a huge success, then we can expect more seasons of this to happen in the future. And, overall, with the healthy Arbitrum ecosystem, then we can expect more DeFi protocols to launch there. Not just DeFi, right? But, many other protocols. And that overall grows the, Arbitrum ecosystem, and, just makes it richer overall. So I think it's a win-win for everyone with these incentives.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think there's a little bit more nuance to it overall, where we'll see like how some protocols, programs, like put them into a spot to be good fiduciaries or bad, and then there'll also just be like some knock-on effects of trying to understand what value was retained after the program was finished. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out, as well as like what kind of investigations are done after the fact to see like what kind of impact it has on the ecosystem.
Yeah. And so, Anton, for the people who are building on top of Pendle, I'm looking at Magpie. They've yet to pass. They're about 30,000 or 30 million Arbitrum votes short of quorum. Additionally, let's see. There's also StakeDAO as well too, who's building on top, and then Equilibria, I believe, is the last one.
Yep. So, our hopes is that their proposals pass as well. And, we try to help them in any way, right? Like whether it's connecting them to protocols or delegates that, might be able to help on their proposal. But overall, I think it's really up to the DAO to decide on whether a proposal passes or not. So there's always the second round, right? So, based on probably the first round feedback, they can improve further, maybe adjust the proposal a bit more and see, what could increase their chances of getting quorum in the next round for sure. But our hopes is definitely that their proposals will pass as well. So not just them, right? So there's definitely a lot of different protocols that we work with closely. So just to shout out the teams like with TimeSwap, Stella, Kyber. Those are ones that we work closely with as well, aside from the the OGs like GMX and Camelot. But yeah, like I think that hopefully everyone is able to get some of these incentives, because I think the intention there is just to grow overall traction and just to be able to make the whole Arbitrum ecosystem grow a bit more. So yeah, hopefully things work well for everyone, I guess.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the InSpecs sheet that they have published. Let me just see if I can bring this up. And it looks like that the total amount of Arbitrum which has been passed so far is 39 million. So in the next round, if things were to end today how they are, there'd be 10 million ARB available in the next round, which is a lot less, but still some incentives to go out. And I'm sure some teams will probably rework their proposals. Notably, actually, I didn't even know this, but AAVE missed the round. Did you guys know this? That AAVE, like,
yeah.
So there was a rule for the Arbitrum grants that for your forum posts, in order to proceed to the voting round, you needed to change one word in the title of the proposal and just add final in it. So if I can pull up Dolomite's proposal here, they have the word final at the top, and then also Pendle as well too. AAVE forgot to put final in the top or in their title, and they've been left out of this voting round. Interestingly.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite unfortunate. And I think there were a couple of events or conferences going on. So I think there was SmartCon from Chainlink that was ongoing as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, probably some missed it. I think some other proposals missed the deadline as well by either timing or, they weren't able to implement like some certain required changes in the proposal, like, making use of the grant within 3 or 4 months instead of like using it within like in the course of over a year. So so factors such as that, right? And I think they'll definitely opt for the second round instead.
Yeah. And just to take that into account, AAVE was asking for 2 million ARB. So if there is 10 million ARB left over, I would just earmark at least 2 million of that for AAVE, because I doubt that they would be turned down.
Yeah. But from what I heard from the working group, if in case the number of proposals that pass breaches the 50 million mark, then there could possibly be another vote where they would increase the overall cap from 50 million to, let's say, 75, 80, depending on the overall reception of this voting process. So I think if there are a lot of proposals that would pass, then chances are they might increase the 50 million cap.
Right. And are there any changes for the round two? I see some new projects that I didn't actually see in the first round that are actually putting proposals up now.
Yeah, so I think one of the new ones I just saw was from Plutus as well. Um, I think, yeah, I see a couple of round two, like dairy, symbiosis. So yeah, we probably see this in the next round.
Yeah. So I see XDFi, Symbiosis, Dare Protocol, Clipper, Diamond Protocol, and Siren. Wonder why they didn't propose in the first round. That's interesting.
Yeah, probably timing as well. Yeah, it was quite quick when it happened. When the first STIP proposal passed, and then everyone had to prepare within, I think, a week or so their own proposals to submit to the DAO or to the forums. So yeah, it was quite a whirlwind process, I would say.
Very cool. Well, we're going to be keeping up on all of these grants, and I want to thank both of you for being here today, Anton and Corey. Learned a lot about your guys' proposals and how it's going to be affecting the Arbitrum ecosystem.
Thank you for having us. And yeah, looking forward to Arbitrum season.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we can have you back on Thursday. We're going to have a big roundtable to go over the end of the voting and talk about the winners and losers of the Arbitrum grants. Otherwise, where can people find you and your projects?
Yeah, so definitely join our Discord. You can find all the links in our site. So just go to pendle.finance and follow us on Twitter. Join our Discord. You can find all whatever needed information that you could if ever you do have any questions based on this call or our proposal. So yeah, do give us a follow.
Yeah, and for Dolomite, you can find us at dolomite.io. All of our links are on there as well, similar to Pendle. You can find us on Discord if you want to chat more, follow announcements on Twitter, and we'll be sure to keep everyone updated with how everything's going.
Perfect. Well, thank you both for being here, Anton, Corey, also Garrett. Lovely to see you as well too, and everybody at home who is watching and listening. Thank you for being here. You can find Leviathan News on YouTube and also Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And we'll be back tomorrow. We have a special guest. We're going to have Windmoon on, and I believe we have Unidex as well too. So 2 projects coming in also to talk about the Arbitrum grants. 2 days left to go vote if you are a delegate, and congratulations on meeting quorum.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having us. It was
All right.
great.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.